Today I'm going to show you how I would paint a snowy landscape like this one, and I'll break it down into all the stages and all the different layers. I'd just like to say a massive thank you to the people who are supporting me over at Patreon. It's really motivating me to keep these tutorials going. If you want to find out more information about that, please check the link in the description, and there'll also be some information at the end as well. Okay, so one of the most important things when I'm beginning this painting is to consider the kind of light sources. And the sky and the sort of sunset is definitely going to be the strongest light source, if not pretty much the only one. So I'm going to get that part of the painting done first, and then from that it will guide how I construct all the other parts. Just to begin with, I'm going to start with, on my first layer, a really sort of lemony yellow colour. I've got it saved there. So I'm going to think about the sort of horizon being probably about 2/3 of the way up. So the sun, I kind of want to do it quite centrally really. Bearing that in mind, I am going to sort of surround it with warmer colours. So I'm going to choose this slightly more kind of orange colour. It's still not strong orange, but you can see it's kind of like a kind of pastely kind of orange at this point. So I'm layering it now, so it's got faded down to the white and then the yellow and then the orange, and I'll do the same at the bottom part as well. So I've not got it set to full opacity, it's quite low, so every time I go over it you get like a darker version of it, so it kind of blends it through. I'll just do a strong version now at the bottom just to get rid of the light down here, otherwise it's just going to get confusing. So if I get rid of it, obliterate it, and now I've really got a strong sense of the light coming from this area, and I'll probably just do the same at the top. What I might just do is go back to the yellow and start to fill in some of these areas, because they're definitely not going to be white at the end. So if I just start to close that in a little bit with the yellow. I want to go for a kind of orange again. Before I went for a slightly lighter orange, now I've got a slightly darker, richer version of that. So all this is just on one layer at the moment, but I do feel at this point I'm going to change layer, and I'm going to pick something more like a kind of purpley kind of colour. You can see it's more towards the slightly pinky end of the red, but it's not a strong version, it's more like a mid between the sort of the white and the richest. I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to start sort of blocking in. I'm going to turn the opacity way down and just start closing in that light source, and it should start to really feel like it's glowing from that area if I successfully start to just sort of close out the light from every other area. And I'll just turn the opacity way up and block in the bottom section just to exaggerate the point again. It takes merely a moment to do that, and it really does help along the way. I'm going to go for a slightly duller version of this now. If I wanted to just blur that up a bit, because it is a separate layer, so I can affect it completely independently of the colours in the background, just to lose some of those brush marks and edges. So I quite like this kind of purpley colour. I'm going to use it, and I'm going to just start to imagine there is maybe a bank of cloud comes and breaks the kind of the sunrise here, just sort of is an interrupting element. I tend to find it will disappear whenever you get sort of near the sun, then the cloud will become less sort of dominant. The cloud, when it's further away, tends to take on a sort of straighter line, gets stretched and straightens out as it goes. Then start to work up here as well. I want to get a sense of a heavy sort of cloud bank near the top as well. Now in terms of the landscape, this is a whole separate layer still, so I'll show you the background. I'm adding cloud detail, and I'm going to start adding a sense of distance with the land now. Just check my brush. I'm on a soft brush. I'm going to change it to a medium brush. I want slightly more of a distinct edge now, so that I can keep this separate from the sky. I'm going to start another layer for the land. I'm going to turn the opacity way down. I'm going to start bringing in a suggestion of layers of landscape. Now because I've got the opacity on low, when I go over this sort of area more than once, you'll see that it darkens up the first piece that I laid down, but then it adds another layer on. So you start to get layers already without any real effort. You begin to get a sense of hills going off into the distance. Okay, If I want to continue that effect, I need to start adding darker layers to it now. Might actually bring this whole area quite a bit further forward. I feel that this whole area should be like a much more prominent. In fact, I'll make it darker. So even now it's very basic, but it's already pushing all the other layers way off into the distance. I think what I'll do next is make an even darker version. So I'm going to do this on a separate layer, and I'm going to bring in now anything that's on this layer now is beginning to be in focus, in detail. So this is where it starts to become important. I'm going to have to sort of begin all my detail and all my foreground elements from this sort of point onward. Now it's still not black. I'll show you the difference between black and that colour. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on camera. So there's a black. It's still a long way from being black, but it is considerably darker than the background. I'm just going to go back to the original layer, which is the second layer, I should say, that I created. The original layer was the warm colours I put down. Then I started to add some of the cloud detail. I feel like I want a lot more bluey kind of colour in the sky area. The reason for that is that when I want this snow to be in the sort of shadows, I want it to pick up on the sort of ambient colour. So you tend to get all the warmest colours be on the horizon, but then you get the rest of the sky. If you turn around and look around the rest of the sky and landscape, you get a much more sort of bluey tone like that. So the warmth has to be concentrated up here, and the way of really focusing and emphasising that warmth there is to perhaps just contrast it with a cooler colour at the top, and also in the shadows. For some part of this, I'm going to introduce some of that cooler colour as well. Not too dramatically, I just want to tie this sort of the upper elements with the lower elements a little bit more. I will return to the sky area and some of the landscape area at a later point, but I want to not spend too much time creating details that I really become fond of, because then if I want to introduce elements that overlaps it and obscures it, then I don't want to feel that I can't do things in certain areas. So I'm going to make another layer, and I'm going to put it on the top for now. I may shift its position, but that's where it's going to go for now. I'm going to stick with the medium airbrush, but I'm going to reselect it as a colour and put it in here. So it is very dark colour, but it's not black. And I'm going to start introducing trees into the landscape at this point. So I'm going to turn the size of the brush way down. And I'm just getting the lines of trees to begin with. So as you can see here, when it comes to drawing the trees, I've just done a straight line, and then at the top I'm just doing some dashes, and then they might go to one side, then left, then right, then left, then right, and you can just sort of build them up so that they get further apart. As you can see, it's sort of the dashes get wider as you go down. Now there's going to be multiple layers of trees, so it doesn't, each tree doesn't have to be perfect anyway, because it's about the general effect. When it gets to the lower parts of the tree, you can just sort of fill in that, because obviously you're going to get ones that are behind that, filling in that area, so there's going to be much less light escaping through the density of trees there, so there's no need to worry about that bottom part. You can just sort of shade that in. So gaps in the trees there, it's not neat. There might be a whole section here, for example, where it doesn't have any branches on it, and that is the way that this particular kind of mountain tree looks. I've not created a specific brush for this as of yet. I'm just relying upon the custom, or the brushes that are actually set within Procreate as default. I've just gone onto the different brush settings here, and I've gone over to retro. I found a texture here called rad that I'm just using to create the sort of a texture, and I'll show you a larger version, just sort of broken. I mean, from a distance, when it's a small detail, it kind of reminds me of the leaves that would appear on this particular kind of tree. So I'm not really doing it for the benefit of zooming in anyway. I'm just trying to get the overall effect. Take a bit more time over this particular tree, just a bit more carefully. It's a more foreground detail, so you can't get away with quite as much. You need to take your time on it. You're not going to see this mostly once the sort of leaves are on there and the branches, but it's good to start off with the shape that you intend. And I'm going to start just adding in some branches coming off there. So keep them quite random. They're not going to be uniform. They're all going to be, if they're curving anyway, typically they tend to sort of curve up slightly more noticeably towards the top. I guess because they're lighter. I think when they get lower down, you might get if there's any snow settled on it, it might start to push the branches down with the weight a little bit more. So gravity starts having more of an impact on the lower branches. So for this tree texture, I've shifted it from the airbrush in this case over to a 6B pencil. I don't worry too much again about the texture, but it's just slightly more interesting texture wise than the airbrush. Okay, I've decided I want to make some changes to the overall composition, so what I've decided to do is I'm going to merge all the background layers, so all the kind of sky layers, and if I select that layer and I'm going to just reformat it, I want to move it as an independent sort of layer, and I want to generally have the light in a lower area there, so I'm going to move that up there, but I'm also going to start moving the other layers to again fit in with it. So all I need to do now is on each layer is just to go and finish off the layers. Obviously we've got white bands at the top and bottom now, so if I select the airbrush again. I also feel once I'm on this layer that I want to start bringing that line down a bit. It's too steep. Let's remove some of that there. So I feel that this line of trees is no longer correct because it doesn't follow the horizon, the shape. So I'm just going to delete those few and then I can make it sort of blend in here. I'm going to create another layer, stick it behind those, so it's in front of the sky but behind all the other details. And I think what I'd like to do is just make another sort of mountain or hill in this sort of area. I'm going to use this tree because it is a tree on its own, and I'm going to cheat a little bit because it's digital format, so you know we use shortcuts, and if we can utilize the layers in ways to actually make our life a bit easier. So you can see with the layer I duplicated it. I'll just run you through that again. If you're not very familiar with the app, you just sort of swipe it and it's got a duplicate, and now I've got a second tree on a different layer that I can manipulate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the size of it. Maybe down here I can flip it on the horizontal level, so I can then move it to different areas. So I can decide to maybe put a tree over here, duplicate that layer again. I can then move that again so I can repeat it. So I'm going to merge those layers. So it's all of those, and now it's a multiple of trees that I can duplicate, and I can move around. I can flip them again, so again they don't seem to form a too obvious kind of repeat of a pattern. And again I can duplicate that layer, move it around, maybe flip it again, maybe merge them and duplicate it again. So now I've got another layer. I can really start to increase the density here of trees if I want to. Okay, I've decided on this layer in the background and I want to make it a little darker. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate the layer, and now you get a much darker version of it. I hope you can see the difference between the trees and that background layer there. Perhaps you'll see it on the finished version a bit more clearly. So I'm just going to merge those two layers, and now I'm going to make another layer behind all the tree layers. So it's going to be behind all the layers of trees that I've just created, but it's going to be in front of that layer there because I'm going to add some detail to that layer. So the colours that I'm going to choose is mainly this sort of bluey grey kind of colour. Now the reason for this colour is it's going to be the general colour of the snow. It's going to have the ambient light of the whole area. Obviously we've got the sunlight that's going to hit the snow, and that's going to be the warm colours. but then you've got the much cooler colours of the sky from everywhere else that would be in that scene. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some snow in the background on this sort of particular area. So I want it to be quite broken and textured in this area, so I'm just doing it as a series of sort of dots and dashes. And now I'm going to create another layer, and this time I'm going to put it above all the other details. And I'm going to be, first of all, doing all the blue tones like I said, so it's going to be the general ambient light that's hitting the snow. And then once I've done all of that, I can always create another layer and go over the top of that with a warmer, lighter sort of colour of snow. I want to start building this up quite gradually. So I might as well just fill in this whole area. In fact, needs a lot more refining, but it's just helping me get a sense of what I'm actually looking at. If I just use the smudge tool, I can just blend in some of these imperfections, some of these issues. So I just need to sort of redefine where the bottom of this tree is going to be slightly. So maybe underneath the tree there's bits of rocks, things that have fallen off the tree, I don't know. Okay, I'm going to create a separate layer. In this layer I'm going to start adding some kind of rock details. So things just to break up here, and it gives me an opportunity to really show some highlights and some extra dark areas in the snow as well. I don't want it all to look flat. Okay, so I've broken that up. I've created some suggestion of kind of rocks. I'll do some more as well, but now it gives me something to actually start showing the effects of the light on as well. But I'm just going to go and create another layer. I'm going to start adding more of the snow effects as well, because obviously these rocks are going to have snow settling on them. Some bits of the snow are going to have the sunlight hitting them, but there's going to be other areas, certainly on the sort of back half of the rock, that it's mainly going to be just the ambient light that's affecting it. So I'm just going to turn the opacity down and start showing some of the snow that may have gathered on the rock that isn't necessarily the light hitting it from the sun. So obviously the snow lands on the top of the rocks, and any little ledges and little things that stick out are going to presumably gather snow as well. But even within this sort of bluey area of the snow, you're going to get some lighter blues and you're going to get some darker blues. Some bits are going to be more shadowed generally, and then other areas are going to be a bit lighter. So I feel like I've got enough of a sense of the ambient light coming in now. It's not neat, but it'll do for now. And now I'm going to move to the kind of warmer lights that's going to start coming in. So this is when I go back to the pre-chosen colours that I've got, and I've got a kind of, well, if I show you on the colour wheel here, it's between the red and the pink, and then it's a sort of a pastel-y kind of grey version of it. So if I show you one here, it's going to appear a lot lighter on screen, especially if I turn the opacity up. So it's quite a vivid colour, but it's taking sort of the colour cue from this sort of area here. So it's like a mixture of the orange and the sort of pinks. So on a separate layer from the blue. So the focus of this light is going to be where the light comes through and where it manages to hit the top surface of things and finds a way through beyond the trees. So it's not going to be cast just here, for example, because there's a rock in the way, but it might just catch the top of the rock in certain areas. So now you're going to have an interplay between the really cold parts of the snow and then the bits that are hit by the sunlight that are going to really be warm colour and stand out by contrast. So it might be on some details it just hits the top edge, but then you've got other areas where it's a flat edge and then it manages to hit the whole area. Because this one, because it's like quite a round shape I'm going for, you'll find the light edge of it is a bit of a slimmer sort of highlight. And then this is a flatter surface, so you're going to get more of an impactful sort of light across the whole of that area, the whole of that surface. The flatter it is, the more light it's likely to pick up from the highlight over here. Again, it's on a separate layer, so I've not messed up any of the background details. I can always continue to adjust it. Again, it's just picking out the top edge of some of these rocks and details. It might be, for example, you've got a kind of a rise here and then a fall on the slope on the other side. So as it goes up on this side, it's not facing the sunlight. So you've got all the kind of bluey area here, but then as soon as it goes over that mound, then the rest of it is going to be hit by the light here. Now I'm very carefully not going all the way up to the trees there. There's going to be a blue area here that's going to be the shadow from those trees. So I might have a light area coming in here, but it's not going to go all the way up to the trees. Going to start adding some sense that the snow has actually landed on the tree now. I'm keeping it as a separate layer in case I want to make corrections and I don't want to necessarily erase bits of the tree itself. So again, this is a dark area. I can't see the texture of the trees, so I'm just starting to use the snow as a way of describing some of these lower branches as well. I'm going to make the snow on the upper bits a slight bit brighter than the blue in the background, otherwise you don't notice the difference. I'm just lightening it up slightly for these upper areas. I might even bring some of the lightness through to this general area, just in places. And there's also going to be some snow that settles on some of the trees over in this area. You're going to find more of the kind of clumps of snow and the bigger bits settling more towards the bottom of the tree, because the branches are stronger, they can hold it more, and the wider as well. And then the snow will settle less as it goes up the tree. Just a few suggestions in the more distant sort of trees. I'm not going to go overboard with that. Just need a few specks just to give a slight suggestion. If you were going to focus over in that area, you might tend to notice just a little bit. It's a much darker blue I'm using over in that area. It's not going to catch your eyes much unless you look really closely. Okay, I'm just going to create another layer. This time I'm going to put it way on top, and I'm going to start using a real kind of warm orange colour this time. You can see the contrast there between the pink, and I might even just take that slightly more towards the yellow. So I want it to really reflect the kind of colours that's going off in here now. I want to turn the opacity way down on this. So I want to use this particular colour quite sparingly to begin with, just on where I feel the pinks are going to pick up on the most sort of light. So right on the back edge of a shape where it's immediately facing it and it's kind of underneath. So rather than it all being blue, I want to have some of the warmth coming through on the snow on those branches as well. Slightly put in some more pink here. I'm going to knock some of that blue back because I think that the general light and the atmosphere is going to just reduce the blue in that area. Although generally in landscapes things get bluer in the distance, that tends to work better in broad daylight, where you get kind of like the blue sky and the blue atmosphere making more of a hazy kind of blue to everything in the background. But when you've got a strong light source like this, it tends to be that everything becomes more like its light source as it gets further away. So I may even turn the opacity up and get some suggestions of more atmosphere going off in the background over here. I think what I'm going to do a little bit more of is go back onto the rocks, and I've set it to an eraser at this point because on this layer I've added a lot of blue to the rocks. So I'm going to use the eraser just to reclaim some of the actual rock shape back a little bit. I'm just going to turn the opacity to sort of middle area, and then I'm going to go over the rocks and just rub out some of the blue that initially I put in there quite sketchily. Okay, I'm just going to spend a bit of time on the sky. I did say that I would return to it, and I feel like it needs a bit of polishing up, just a bit of refining, because I only put it in there as a sort of temporary suggestion of the light, but it needs a bit more, just like I say, a bit more refining at this point. I want to kind of close the light down so it's definitely fierce in this area, but then it's less bright on the outer edges. So I think what I'll do, I'm getting a lot of layers here, we've got 12 now, but I am going to create another one. I'm going to put it above the sky, but behind everything else. So I'm going to affect the sky, but nothing else really. Turn the opacity down, and I'm going to start just building up this background, build up the tone a little bit, make it a bit darker. In fact, it's not quite dark enough. I think especially this sort of area and this area needs closing down a bit in terms of the light. So I'm also going to use, in fact I'll select it here to make sure it's consistent. I'm going to start bringing down the purpley colours down here as well. Again, I'm going to bring in that pink, so it's a mixture of the two. Some more orange into here, so I want the sort of the brightest bit to be over here, so I can deepen up my orange colours in this area. I feel like this area especially needs to be just sort of toned down a bit in terms of the light. I'm just going to use some of the yellow in and around the sun area. I obviously want the sun to be the brightest point, so that can be pure white, but the lightest thing around and everywhere else can't be any brighter than a bright yellow really, in order to make this area stand out. But then I feel I need the orange to then introduce that to the landscape a little bit more gently. So I'm just trying to sort of bring down some of the darker blues and the purples, and just generally get a sort of nice mix of the colours together there. Some stripes of the blues cutting across, some stripes of the kind of pinky colours cutting across. It's really narrowed the focus of light down to a much smaller area. If I zoom you in, you'll see that it's more focused in and around that area now. And then that means that for that area, which is the brightest white, I can really focus in, make sure it's the purest white I can get, begin to sort of exaggerate the effect of the light coming from there. So that makes it more believable then when you're getting strong highlights here, because you've got such an intense light there, it makes it seem to make sense when it hits other areas and really has a strong impact. Just creating some of the strongest sort of reflections, just like you would in water. It tends to go right underneath where the strongest light source is coming from. So anything straight below it like this, within the sort of vertical line or vertical region, will be the most impacted by that brightest light. And what I think I will also do is just make it sort of affect this area as well a little bit, just so it knocks it a little bit further back. I could refine this further, I could go into all the different details and make sure they're absolutely as realistic as I could possibly get them, but I think that I've managed to get across the overall impression that I was going for, so I'm going to leave it there for today. If you want to help support me produce more pieces like this and more tutorials, please head over to my Patreon page. The link is in the description. Otherwise, please check out my videos in my playlist. I do loads of different kind of categories, and I intend to be back here as much as I possibly can. I'm aiming for once a week, so every Saturday, sort of morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Expect to see another tutorial from me. All your support really helps me to that end, so I hope to catch you back here again. See you later.